Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October open mic night. Today, we're excited to have a presenter from the University of Maryland's Ag Law Education Initiative, Miss Megan Todd, and she's going to talk a little bit tonight with you guys about Maryland tax exemptions for farm business personal property. So we're really excited to have her here. Before we kick it over to Megan, I would like for folks to go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce themselves in the chat box. If you can give us your name and then, your farm that you're with, you can even give us a little bit of information about the kinds of products you're selling or services. That would be fantastic, just so Megan can kind of get to know who our urban farmers are in Prince George's County. I also just wanted to let you know I'm going to be producing with Linda Jones a survey on open mic nights to see if there's additional topics that you guys, would like to hear more about. Also want to check everyone's temperature on the frequency of the open mic nights and maybe what months you guys want to pause the open mic nights. So we're going to do a little bit of reconnaissance work on that. So, look out for that on the Google group. The November 15th open mic night, I believe, is going to be the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Bill Tharp with the Small Farm and Urban Farm program. He is going to be talking about the release of their new cover crop program. And I think we're going to try to see if we can get some other MDA folks to come and just talk about MDA services in general that urban farmers can take advantage of. So I'll have more details on that coming up, but that's just what we're working on for November. And the plan is to take a break in December, unless folks would really like to do an open mic night in December, but I know it gets pretty busy. So with that, just go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat box, your name and the farm that you're with and what you're doing and selling. And if you have any specific questions for Megan, you're welcome to put them in the chat box. I'm going to ask that folks refrain from asking her questions until she asks you or gives you, I don't want to say gives you permission, but she gives you guys the green light to do so, or just keep them in the chat box and she can get to them when she's done her presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Megan. Thanks again so much for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, my pleasure. Keep coming in the introductions in the chat box. I'll read them. Let me see as we go forward and at the end of the chat, but let me start sharing my screen. Hope I have it set up the right proportions. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And I do see some familiar names in the audience today. So hi, everyone. If I've seen you before, nice to see you again. Kim mentioned that I've got a little one in the background. I'm set up at the kitchen table, dinner's going. So you might see him run over and he'll sit on my lap for maybe half of the presentation if so, but don't mind him. He's used to it at this point. So today's topic, we're going to go over business personal property tax, the agricultural exemptions that apply in Maryland. This is a topic that came up from a question from Kim, actually, or from somebody in PG County who was doing their annual business property tax return. And so that prompted us to do a little bit of research. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to share what we found and, some useful information for everyone who, if you're a Maryland business and you have to do your annual filing, your annual tax return, you can use it going forward. Like Kim mentioned, I work for the Agricultural Law Education Initiative. If you haven't heard of us yet, please check us out. Our website is umaglaw.org. We've got lots of free resources, publications and videos aimed toward helping the Maryland agricultural community better understand legal obligations and, helps them strengthen their business. We also try to, we do a lot of federal stuff. So if you're in another state, you might find something that's applicable and helpful to you as well. I do have to mention, of course, because I'm a lawyer, that that's a legal disclaimer here. This presentation is intended to be general information, educational only. It's not intended to be legal or tax advice. We always recommend that even if the situation seems really similar to what you're going through right now, to go ahead and seek the advice of an attorney, or in this case, an accountant, who can really assess your individual business situation to give you the best advice. So first I'm going to do like a really quick overview of just like the different types of taxes. So you kind of like have in your mind, like the idea of where, of what kind of taxes we're talking about. So we have income taxes. There's basically three types of taxes, right? Taxes on what you earn, taxes on what you own, and taxes on goods and services, like what you buy. So income, think about your annual tax returns. And then if you have employees, the taxes that are withheld, like employment taxes, right? For property, we've got two main types of taxes. You've got real property taxes and personal property taxes. Hi, Eden, you want to sit with me? Okay. And so personal property taxes was, of course, one of the topics for tonight. And then we have goods and services. We have goods and service taxes, which is, yeah, that's a chicken, which are taxes on sales taxes. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about sales taxes later on tonight too. Oh, there you go. Yeah, personal property taxes and sales and use taxes. That's our topic for tonight. So property taxes are, okay. Property taxes are an essential source of revenue for state and local governments in the United States. They're really important sources of funding for projects, you know, public projects and public services. And locally in Maryland, just to give you an idea of like the sheer amount of property tax that people collect. For local counties in Maryland, property taxes constitute about 26.3% of their local revenue. And if you're interested in reading more about, you know, county revenue streams and, you know, where they get their funding and how they use it, there's a link here to a Department of Legislative Services report they do one every year for revenue and budgets and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting to read if you're into that kind of stuff. And then statewide in Maryland, fiscal year 2020, the state collected approximately, you know, $1,700 per person in property tax. So it's a lot of money per person that we're paying. And so every exemption or every, you know, it goes toward good sources, right? But every instance that you cannot pay that much money would be, you know, something to be aware of. And if you're interested also in where Maryland gets its money and how its budget is allocated, things like that, there's a link there. Again, if you're into that kind of stuff. So business personal property tax. This is, you know, if you're a business, you're formed in Maryland or you're registered to do business in Maryland, you are required to file a business personal property tax return with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. You know, this applies even if you're a sole proprietor or a partnership, you still have to file this. You know, you might, so those types of businesses might not have to do like, you know, business filing or formation filings or other things, but you still have to do an annual property tax return because most businesses in the state own, lease, or use some sort of personal property within the state. And when I say personal property, what I really mean is property that can be moved or touched, like as opposed to real property. So real property is like real estate, land and houses, you know, like things that are permanent fixtures. That's real property. Personal property is, like I said, what can be moved or touched, like your business equipment, any machinery, the inventory that you create, furniture items you have in your office, vehicles that you use to transport your goods. That's all personal property. So here's some examples here, just, you know, that I was thinking quickly, you know, what are some main categories of personal property that an agricultural business might have on hand? So tools and equipment that are, or implements that are specialized for agriculture, your crops, your livestock, those are technically considered personal property, right? Vehicles, including tractors, farm trucks, trailers, things like that. Storage, so coolers and freezers and other types of storage, like if you have a, any kind of like silo or things like that. Anything you use for processing, that's considered business personal property. And then, you know, irrigation equipment, post-harvest stuff, milking machines, all of that kind of stuff is personal property. So yeah, you can imagine like if you're a farm business, that you have like a lot of property that you would potentially have to pay property taxes on every year as a business. So who sets the personal tax rate within the state of Maryland? And this was a good question. I mean, I think this was kind of the main thrust of the question that we received to do some research on, but what we found is that there's no state set tax rate for personal property. It's all assessed at the county or municipality level. So they can levy taxes. Typically, you have the year you purchase it, so your purchase price, and then on an annual basis, they will depreciate the value that they assess that tax rate on. It depends on what type of property it is, for what type of depreciation percentage they'll allow for it. But you can go on to a stat website and they have these tables. You might have seen this document or a table like this before. And this is what lists every year, they might change the percentage rates. So they publish a list every year of what the current tax rates are. So it's different by county. It's averaging, I would say, like, it doesn't, a few percentage, 1 to 2%.
On the way home, I have to stop and get.
Is there a question? Oh, sorry, I can't see the videos right now.
I got it. I think someone just came in, someone new
Okay.
came in and didn't have it themselves muted, but we're good. Sorry about that, Megan.
Yeah, I can't see. I'm talking to my computer right now. I can't see anybody's faces because I can't figure out how to get the videos up right now. But for questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat box, or if it's like a really urgent question, just interrupt me because I can't see. Like I said, I can't see. But yeah, so there's the tables that set the tax rates, and it's easy to check. So if you do have, so you say you're doing your report and you know you have personal property, you have to file tax, and be taxed on, you would come to this table, you download this table, and based on the county or the city that your business is located in, or the property is located in, that's the tax rate that you're going to apply, and you'll do a table. So for the property that's exempt, the state law requires that certain types of personal property can be fully exempt throughout the state. So like I said before, like the state doesn't set the personal property tax rate, it's the counties, but the state law says that no county can assess a personal property tax on certain types of property. And that includes farming implements owned or leased by a farmer that are not subject to valuation or property tax. Okay. And I put the links here to the Maryland statute section in case you're interested in that. And it's a pretty vague definition if you ask me. So I went to the Webster's dictionary and looked up what implements means. And it means broadly a tool, utensil, or other piece of equipment, especially as used for a particular purpose. So that still leaves a lot open to interpretation, I think. But farming tools, farming implements like irrigation equipment, grow lights, like all that stuff seems to me to fit into the category of farming implements, things that you use in agriculture. It also includes farm trucks, tractors, trailers, and other farm vehicles. Those are exempt from personal property tax, business personal property tax. And then finally, we have exemptions for sort of like inventory type things. So crops or the produce of any farmed land that is in the possession of the person that operates the farm. So your personal property in terms of crops and inventory is exempt as long as you're the one who has grown it, basically. And this applies in waterman situations too. So, fishermen, watermen who have fish. If you're someone that has unadulterated green coffee beans, and poultry and eggs and other types of livestock are all exempt from personal property tax assessment when you do your return. So when you're doing your return, if you've done this before, you go into the SSTAT website, and depending on what type of business structure you have, will determine which form you use. There's two main forms, really. If you're an LLC or corporation or any other type of business, you would file with using Form 1. And when this is like the combined annual report and personal property tax return, those are two separate filings, but they're bundled together in the same PDF. And then if you're a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, like I said, you still have to file it, and you have a different form to use that's linked there. I'm not going to show the form because it's already boring enough talking about taxes. But you may be wondering, like, how do you actually go about? Because if you've seen these forms, you know that there's space there to like write in the type of property that you have that is subject to assessments, right? It's easy enough to be like, okay, I have got this, that's not exempt, like this, that's not exempt. But where do you put the information about like your farming implements and your livestock, right? That's still something you have to report, even if you don't pay taxes on it. Well, there is a form SD1 supplemental detail. It's also on the SDAT website. And I will say, I'll give credit to people who like were having problems with, figuring out what to do, because it's not easy. You have to read in the forms here. There's the instruction form, which is very detailed and lengthy, and I appreciate that from SDAT, but you have to really read all the way to the very end of that form to even get an inkling that yes, there is a supplemental detail form, and yes, agricultural implements and things like that are included in the exempt category. So,
Megan?
Yeah, go ahead.
We had two questions. I didn't know if we could pause and just answer those two questions.
Sure.
Before we continue on. I know that, so Lawan asked about items you use that have been gifted to you, like how that counts. And I think Constance had her hand raised.
That's a really good question, Lawan. I would say, because it's not based on your personal property, like is what you own. And I think the tax rate, the assessment isn't based on what you paid necessarily. I mean, that's a tricky question. I might have to do some more research on that, because I think even if you didn't pay anything for it, it's still assessed for what its market value might be. Right. And it really kind of depends on what type of property you're talking about. So I'd be happy to do a little bit more digging on that question, because I think it's a really good question. But that's my first take on it, is that even if you didn't pay anything for it, you would, if it's not exempt, you would still have to report it and potentially pay tax on it.
I need to be let out.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. That was just checking. And then let's see, is there another question in the chat here?
I think Constance had a question, and then Jamila also had a question. And Constance, do you want to go ahead? Because I know you had your hand up first, and then I can read you Jamila's question, Megan.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Megan. This is Constance with Diddley Squat Farming. So how do you apply this, the Form 1 and the SD1? Like last year, I already filed my taxes for last year, but there was equipment that I purchased and I didn't have this information. So do you use either of these forms to apply if you've already filed your taxes and you want to claim exemption on what you purchased?
Oh, I think you would have to do like an amended report, or like, an amended return if you wanted to, for instance, like if you reported it previously and it didn't get exemption.
Or I just didn't know that I could claim exemption, so I didn't report it at all.
Oh, interesting. You may just want to include it in your next year's return. I mean, the safest thing to do is to call SDAT and your local contact, and ask them how you can amend your return, if you want to do that, or you can just wait till next year.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, if you purchase something out of state, how can you apply to not get taxes assessed on something that you purchase out of state?
Okay, I'm going to go into that in a few slides, so I'm going to put a pin in that one. We'll get to it.
And Megan, our question from Jamila is this filing completely separate from annual tax filing for the IRS?
Yes, separate and apart. Yes, it's a state filing, so it's like in. I'm not sure that the IRS. Yeah, so you would do your federal returns separately than your state returns, because the annual report and the state business personal property tax return are state requirements. for Maryland.
All right, and we have one last question from Liz.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. So is the SD1 something that we can find online? Like when we're doing our online annual filing, there's an option for SD1?
Okay.
Okay.
So I actually found, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I actually found the link, it's hyperlinked in here, but I actually found the link on, I'm sure you're familiar with the SDAT website, but the page where you go to download the forms, it's like on the bottom of that page.
And then is this like, I know, so I've been through it with manufacturing equipment where you basically have to submit a request to them in advance for them to assess your equipment and approve that it's all exempt. Is that something that we need to do with farming, or is it way more straightforward?
I think it's more straightforward. I go into it a little bit in the next few slides, but yeah, there are some categories, like some categories of businesses and categories of equipment that if you want to be, you know, have an exemption, you have to, go through an application process, basically, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case with the agricultural exemption, not from what I can see. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So in order to report the property that you have that is exempt from the personal property tax rate, you would use, you would do your report, and you'd also attach SD1. And this is what it looks like. And so you have a similar table, just like in the annual report, the regular form, and you've got these categories, of different types. I don't know why they put land on here, because it's for personal property tax, but who am I to question that at this point? But, this is where you would list your various farm implements, and you would select, there's another section on the form lower down where you would select the type of property and say farming implements, which is available to farmers only. So that's a peek at the form. Just pretty straightforward. I can't say that I've ever filled this form out before, so I can't give you advice on how to fill it out, but SDAT has contact information for local contacts, and they would probably be the best person to reach out to for technical questions on how to complete the annual report and the tax return. So that's it basically for the business personal property tax exemption. It's really straightforward. Like I said, you don't have to, if you wanted to do, so you asked me the thing about getting approval, and I have to go back a little bit and say that when you file your annual report, the property tax, but when you do your annual report, if you want to file your annual report as a certified farm business, which has a reduced filing fee, that is separate. That's different than if you own exempt property, right? So if you want to file as a certified farming business, that requires an application and pre-approval. Before you file your report, your annual report. So you have to be approved before you can get that lower rate. But even if you're a farm and you're not a certified farm yet, you may still own property that's exempt from property tax. So you could still use this SD1 form.
Are you going to go into that certified farm process in this presentation at all?
I wasn't going to, I didn't plan on it. But let me see if I can remember off the top of my head what it involves. It's basically, I have the slides in a different show. It's, it's a type of business entity that's recognized in the state of Maryland that has certain requirements, statutory requirements. Oh my goodness, it's been about a month or two since I did that presentation.
It sounded like you had to have real property that was assessed with agricultural use.
Yeah.
So like an urban farmer with even an acre probably wouldn't qualify because they're not ag assessed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically the state of the events, or the state of that situation in Maryland right now, which is unfortunate because you don't have to own, you have to control. So you could be owning it or leasing the property, but it still has to meet that agricultural use assessment thresholds. In addition to family ownership, you only own and control property that is used for agricultural purposes like real property used for agricultural purposes, things like that.
But it sounds like some of the folks, like maybe Constance and some other folks that have 3 or more acres that's agriculturally assessed, that's family owned and operated, or under a certain dollar threshold, they can apply and possibly qualify, and then they would get their fees would be $100 versus $300 annually.
Yeah, there's no requirements that it's family owned, and there's no minimum, unless you're talking about like the minimum income that you need to qualify for the ag use assessment rate. They're to be certified, you know, I mean, I guess they're kind of like hand in hand, right? So like if for the ag use assessment, if you're like on between 3 and 5 acres, I think you need a minimum of $2,500 in income from farm productions, right? Farm products to qualify. You know, one of the ways to qualify with predominant use, you know, a certain list of recognized agricultural uses. If you're between 5 and 20, there's some other standards, and then above 20, it's just, you know, whatever acreage you have that's ag for in active agricultural use.
And do you know who sets those rules? Because I think it would be really good to advocate that just from the urban farm perspective, because a lot of what they're looking for is farm, you know, they consider farms anybody, or a business, farm business, anybody who makes over $1,000 or would have. And if you're looking at, you know, some of those smaller operations, $300 versus $100 for business purposes is kind of a big deal, you know, for farmers that are just getting started. And if it's something that we can change, if it's not like a statute or something that would require a bill, or even if it is, it's something to look at as urban farming gets more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I do agree with that. And we see a lot more, like you're going to hear from hopefully MDA in a few weeks, right? And they've got a lot more grant programs coming up geared toward urban farmers. I think the best people that you could possibly talk to, I think it would probably take a state level, because it's a state law. So it would take kind of lobbying or advocating with your local like senator, your, you know, state senator, you know, so when they go to the General Assembly every year, they can write a bill, propose a bill to make some amendments for that. That's a great project for, I don't know, maybe the Maryland Food Council. I don't know, Food Resiliency Council.
Yeah,
Or
Kim,
yeah, Maryland Farm Bureau.
the
Yeah.
Farm Bureau. Awesome. Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, from what I can tell, you don't, like I said, you don't have to be a certified farm business in order to benefit from the agricultural personal property exemptions. So that's a plus right now, you know. Let me pause real quick and see what questions we have. What if your farm hosts other events or activities like goat yoga? Could you elaborate a little bit on that question?
I just gave the example of goat yoga, because basically you're doing yoga, but you have your goats there, but I've never done it before. I've seen other people do it. But ideally I would do like yoga workshops that also deal with, hey, let's go and taste some of the crop that we have, and then also do a yoga session. So it would be more inclusive in that manner. And so if, for instance, on this list, it lists like tools and training, will I have to list my yoga property as well? Or is it just specifically stuff that is used to grow food? That's what I was wondering.
So that's a really interesting question. And I'm going to say, like, based on what I'm reading also in like the next section, when we talk about the sales and use exemptions, some of the listed items in there, I feel like can guide information about what type of personal property may also be exempt. My first guess is that no, the yoga materials, yoga mats and whatever, that would not be exempt property. Even though you're using it on a farm, it's not a farming tool. You're not using it for agricultural purposes. So it's not exempt. It wouldn't qualify. The goats are, you know, like they're livestock, so they would count, right? But you know, generally speaking, when we look at the sales and use taxes next, items that, you know, could be like general household items like carpentry tools or whatever, refrigerators that you use in your home, like if you're not using it for an agricultural purpose, it's not going to be exempt from taxes.
But at the same time, would you even need to claim that as personal property for the business? Because it's so de minimis. It's like a mat might be $20 or $30. Like that's not something they would typically report on personal property filings, right?
Not unless you own like a whole lot of them, right? Like that's something, yeah, you're right. It's a really small
Like,
value.
what would be the threshold where we would need to consider, okay, I bought
Question.
10 bins for storage that individually were small, but equaled up to maybe $1,000. Like, at what point do we need to consider it personal property that we should be reporting? And I'm sorry if you were already going to cover this.
No, that's a great question. I didn't cover that, what the de minimis amount is for actually reporting it on your taxes, your business personal tax returns. And that's a question I should look into. And I can get back to you on that because that's a really good question. I mean, one thing I did notice is that, like, you know, for some businesses where, you know, like tuxedo rentals are an industry that are specifically called out in the instructions form because those tuxedos that are rented out depreciate at a higher value. So okay, I'll give you some water. Hold on. So, you know, those tuxedos individually may not be worth, I mean, I don't know, tuxedos can be pretty pricey, but a suit, for instance, that you rent a suit rental individually may not be worth a whole lot of money, but in the aggregate as a business, if that's a key integral part of their business, then, you know, that's what they do and report. But that's a good question that I will do some further research in, and what the de minimis or the minimum amount it is for reporting on your tax returns. I feel like that's probably something I could look up pretty quickly and get back to you. Sorry, I don't have an answer right now for that. Let's see. It's possible we got cottage foods cap raise. We did get the cottage foods cap raise. It's now $50,000, by the way. Let's see. Where can you find information on becoming a certified farm business? I can send you some information, some slides and some links and things like that after the presentation if you would like me to. But it's basically all on the STAT website if you can do a little digging, but I can send you the links happily. Were there any other questions on the business personal property tax side of things right now? Hearing none, I will go ahead and move forward. So next we're talking about a little bit about sales and use tax in Maryland. And so sales tax, as I mentioned before, is imposed on basically anything you purchase in a retail transaction. And it's a percentage-based tax, and it's determined by the price of the item that you buy, right? So 6% is Maryland's sales tax rate. So 6% of $1, 6 cents, or 6% of $100 is $6, right? So your sales tax rate, if you're buying some really expensive equipment, can be pretty high, unfortunately. And these rates are generally set by the state and local government. We're talking about the state tax rate right now. So ag sales and use tax exemptions in Maryland, the sales and tax rate does not apply to sales, including the rentals, to a farmer of farm equipment used to raise livestock and poultry, equipment used to prepare, irrigate, or tend the soil, equipment used to plant, service, harvest, store, sorry guys, clean, dry, or transport seeds or crops, and farm equipment that is used for traditional agricultural purposes is exempt from sales and use tax, even if it is attached to real property. So, you know, sometimes you have things that you buy and then you later install on your farm, for instance. So that could be an instance. So this one's pretty straightforward. The sales and use tax in Maryland, at least, it's very straightforward. There is a great publication from STAT called Business Tax Tips number 11, Sales and Use Tax Exemptions for Agriculture. It's got a pretty extensive list, excuse me, of some examples of the types of equipment that is exempt from sales tax. This includes, beekeeping equipment, egg handling equipment, milking, poultry, irrigation, feeders, mowers, sprayers, storage tanks, like all kinds of stuff. As long as I said it's being sold for agricultural purposes, and even things like seeds, fertilizer, lime, fungicide, herbicide, pesticides are all exempt from sales tax in Maryland when they're used for agricultural purposes. It's really easy to claim this exemption in the state. You don't have to register, you don't have to pre-register with SDAT like you may have to do for other types of businesses or types of equipment. Generally, it's the vendor is the one that's responsible for keeping records, right? Because as a business, that you have to pay sales tax to the state, right? You register to pay sales tax. So when they're doing sales, if they're not collecting sales tax on every transaction, they have to keep records of why they might be short. So they may ask you for some information, and they may ask you to sign a statement to indicate that you, as a customer, are a farmer, or that the purchase is going to be used for an agricultural purpose. And this right here, this little picture, is basically what the certificate looks like. So you may have to fill that out in the state of Maryland to get this exemption when you just go buy your equipment and say, I want the ag exemption. Very simple. Someone asked about, what about if you're making a purchase in another state? So like you're a Maryland farmer, but you want to buy something in say Pennsylvania or something. I'm sorry, guys, 1 second.
Thank you, everyone, for the awesome questions tonight. And I've been dropping some of the forms that Megan has been talking about in the chat box. So again, I'll send you guys the PDF version of Megan's presentation, which will have all of the links in it, but you'll also get a copy of the chat box file.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I had to pull my potatoes out of the oven. Okay, right. So it's a little bit, I would say it's like, I think Virginia, it's really straightforward. Delaware, there are no sales taxes. So if you're buying anything in Delaware, you don't have to worry about it anyway. For Virginia, they have Virginia and Pennsylvania. They also have, just like Maryland, they've got a certificate form that would have to be filled out. And so from what I was able to find out in Pennsylvania, it's complicated. So farming, so just like in Maryland, if you're making a purchase for agricultural purposes, you can fill out the exemption sheet. You don't have to be registered in the state. You don't have to be a business in the state. You just fill out the form in a way that indicates that you are making that purchase, like for that one individual purpose for farming stuff, and sign it.
Do you mind if I mention something from an accounting perspective?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. So typically the vendor would be responsible for complying with the local state, the purchaser's state. So even if you're purchasing something from California, if they have a liability to collect and remit sales tax in Maryland, then they would collect and remit sales tax according to Maryland's laws. And if you're exempt according to Maryland as an ag producer, then you would just provide that same Maryland certificate, which is not really a certificate because they don't issue it, but it's like a blank form that you just fill out and send to the vendor. I've bought stuff all over the country with that.
That's awesome. So that's even simpler than having to do the individual state's certificate form.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Yeah, so if you've got that like in your pocket ready to present every time you do a purchase in another state, that's even easier. But in case you were asked by a vendor to sign one of their certificates, in their state, it's rest assured that it's basically the same thing, and you would still be exempt for farming equipment. These sections of the code, like she was saying that, if they're recognizing the state, the Maryland state tax rate, then that's fine. You follow what Maryland's categorization is for sales tax, acceptable sales tax exemption purchases. But if you were interested in knowing what Virginia and Pennsylvania also list, which is basically the same, there's some links there for you to check out and read. Hold on a second. Okay, and so this next slide is a sales tax refund. And I think this probably applies more to the business side, business who may have like prepaid their sales tax for the quarter, and then they've got, a few customers who came in who had that exemption certificate. And so they overpaid their sales tax to the state and they want to get a refund. But if you also individually think that you paid sales tax on a large ticket item that you didn't really need to, there is a form that you can fill out and submit to apply for a sales tax refund. For the best and easiest processing, you would include non-returnable copies of records that support the refund request. So if you have an invoice or a certificate of resale, a canceled check, something to prove that you actually bought it and paid sales tax, then you could send that in to SDAT. So that's just my overview. Were there any other questions right now on any topic touched on today?
I do have a question. So I purchased beekeeping equipment, I want to say 2 years ago, but I didn't start actually farming the bees because beekeeping equipment is really expensive. So can I back do the sales exemption, or does it have to be within the same year?
For the sales tax?
Yeah, because it was like 500. I don't know. It was really expensive. I spent a lot of money on just getting enough beekeeping equipment so that I could take care of the bees.
I'm just trying to remember when I was reading the form. There probably is a time limit, and I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head. Was it more than 5 years ago, you said? Or
No, it was about 2 years ago.
2 years ago? I don't know off the top of my head, but I can look into it and email you. I think it has to be fairly recent.
Okay.
For you to get.
Okay, cool.
If you want to, you can throw your email, your contact information in the chat box, and I will follow up with you.
I have a question for you. This is Ernest. Can you hear me? You're muted, Megan.
Oh, I can hear you. Go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
my toddler's playing with a toy down here. I wanted to spare you the noise.
I live on 13 acres and it's primarily wooded, heavily wooded. And my wife and I were thinking about starting what's called a ramp farm. It's basically a combination between garlic and onion. It's a very expensive item for those chefs who like to, I don't know if you know what a ramp is. Now they grow great in wooded areas such as ours. We've got 13 acres, of which I would say 1 or 2 is developed. Can you share with me some information as to how I could get this process going? You're muted. Now you're unmuted.
So in terms of like setting up the farm on your wooded acres?
Yes. And would something like that qualify? Basically, the farming is just simply planting ramps in the woods.
I mean, it's a crop. You're doing agriculture if you start doing that. So that's farming. So yeah, I think we should probably touch base offline to get more information in terms of like what types of resources you want to get your farm business started. But it's an agricultural commodity, right? It's something that you would sell, it's food. So that would count. And any supplies that you would need to grow, the seeds that you're buying, any fertilizer that you're buying to plant those crops could be exempt from sales tax. Yeah.
Okay, you say I should get in contact with whom, or?
You can follow up with me if you want, and we can have a little bit more detailed conversation, in terms of what types of resources you're looking for, and I can connect you with some people, like with, you know, like extension people are really great for helping with business planning and market research and things like that. So
Okay, the email that you have is my wife's email, so is there any possibility that you can forward any information to that email?
yeah, whatever email you give me, I can connect
Okay,
you
I
there.
believe you have it now.
Let's see. Is it
Elijah2go@hotmail.com.
Kim, would you be able to share it with me?
That's what I'm thinking. Ernest, I'll see if you registered for this evening, because I can grab the email.
My wife is, look for Linda.
Lynn.
Linda. Okay. And what's her last name? Because we have a couple of Lindas.
Peters hyphenated Bligen, Bligen.
Okay. Yeah, I can put you guys in touch, and if we can be a help too at the district, that would be wonderful to connect with you as well, Ernest.
I appreciate that. Also, she was concerned with the fact, she was wondering whether or not this transcript could be, she's out of town right now. Could she look it up somewhere else or later on? Is that
Yeah.
possible?
I think, yeah, Kim's recording, so you can share the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, Megan, are you able to stop sharing your screen
Oh, yeah.
for a moment? This way folks can kind of see each other a little bit more. There we go. Thank you. That was awesome, by the way. Thank you so much.
I hope it's helpful, and I'm happy to take more questions. And for the people that I couldn't answer your question today, I'm more than happy to do some more research and follow up with you.
I have a question about the tax exemption. But not tax exemption, filing those personal property taxes. If I'm not mistaken, there is a threshold of how much you would actually need to have to even have to fill the form out. You have to fill the form out, but you just claim 0. And I think for some reason, I want to say it was 20,000. I want to say that, but I'm not exactly sure because this year it went up. So you just filed 0 on that form, unless it's a different, totally new form that's coming out. Because this was actually a second year I've had to do this, but it was kind of weird because I didn't realize I had to file it if I didn't have anything to claim, you know, as far as like personal property, because it was under a certain dollar amount. And then if it's under a certain dollar amount, then you have to file the form, but you just claim 0. So in order not to get your business forfeited and all of that type of stuff. Yeah, so that's what I experienced this year. So
Yes, that is absolutely right. I'm trying to remember what the dollar amount is. I think they actually listed on the form for you. I think it's $10,000. If it's less than $10,000, is what the most recent one says.
Were you
Yes,
talking
it said-
about the sales tax collection requirement?
no, that's the personal property tax
Oh,
form that you have to complete.
they
Yeah, it
also
went-
ask you like if you own or lease any property in the state, like I have multiple businesses, so my lease is in one business. My other businesses don't have a lease and they didn't really have any need to file. So I just answered no, and then I don't even have to file that form.
No, okay.
I think Stephanie maybe had a question about the glass jars for canning. I could just say my personal experience, like I've submitted even big box stores like Lowe's. I do have to buy things from there, and I just submitted that same Maryland's agricultural exemption to those big box stores, and then pretty much anything I buy in there is exempt as long as it's legit, but they're not really checking individually.
Do you just give it to the cashier when you check out?
No, you usually have to, well, I don't know, every store is different, but I've had to like register as a tax exempt entity, and then they give you like a tax exempt number, like Best Buy, Lowe's, I haven't done Staples yet, but I probably will. Like any of those where I get like my marketing materials. I've gotten custom printed boxes from FedEx, and I've sent them my tax exempt forms, all of our packaging, pretty much everything.
Just using the ag exemption certificate?
Yep. Sometimes they'll ask you like, how do you plan to use this? Like, I get a lot of, stuff from Webstaurant store, or Uline, sometimes they'll ask you specifically just to kind of make sure that their T's are crossed. But usually you just give them your certificate and that's it.
I see Felice's hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about that, because you mentioned something about the extension having resources for business planning, and I would like to receive more information about that. And also I just had a quick question about, like, as far as exemptions for the sales portion of it. So like if you donate any type of food, or if you like if you have some things that you do as a courtesy or whatever, are you able to document that on your annual filings as well, or is that just something that you kind of just have to itemize on the federal level?
So first, I would absolutely connect you with some people at Extension for business planning and marketing stuff. In terms of charitable donations, I'm sorry, I did not prepare for that question today. That's something that I would be happy to research for you, but I think that's something that you would really talk to, like if you have an accountant. That's like,
Yeah, that's the part that I'm not really 100% solid about. Like I understand a little bit about as far as like the taxes we're supposed to pay, but like when we're charging taxes, or like when we're experiencing things that we could possibly like write off or whatever, and that's fine. I just was wondering if you had like any information offhand. You don't have to go back and check on that. You're right. I could just talk to an accountant about that stuff. I was just curious.
I'd be happy to do some like initial type of research that you can like, have a better foundation when you talk to your accountant. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the federal write-offs for donations, that's, something, I guess you would do that on your business income tax return, right?
Yeah, it's not something you would need to file like you could file it with your state income taxes, but it's more income tax and business. Like if you are a sole proprietor, you're filing just basically income taxes. If you're a multi-member LLC or a corporation, then that's a different level of tax, but it's all like your income tax return, because it would be any of your donation. I mean, I don't know how it works with agricultural donations specifically. But generally, like if you're donating things, it's the market value is your donation. And then, you're allowed a certain level of donation to offset your income.
Yeah, and figuring out what
we still have like the 300. You talking about the annual filing for like, because we're under LLC. So ours is usually annually like 300.
Yeah, but this stuff you're talking about for deductions, that's income or business income taxes, not your annual filing or sales or use filings.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like you're not taking a deduction on like inventory. It's not a personal property item that you're donating. It's like an income generating item. It's like basically income that you're kind of donating, so it'd be something you would put on your income taxes, not your personal property taxes, which are different but confusing, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, feel free to email me if you want to talk more about that later. I see Lawan has her hand up too.
Okay, thank you so much for this. This has been very informative. My question is about, okay, I have a bakery and also an herb shop. So if I'm using a card to process someone's payment from a bakery item, and how the card charges automatically the fees, Am I
Mhm.
supposed to be recording those taxes on that to file on the sales and use tax form? Because baked items, I typically don't charge fees at all for baked goods. I don't charge taxes, excuse me, for baked goods. But when you use someone's card, it processes taxes and fees.
You have to change your settings in the system. It's actually like, if you're required to collect taxes, then you have to collect them and remit them. But if you're not required to, and you collect them, you can get in trouble for collecting sales tax and not remitting it. So if you're collecting it, you have to remit it, but you can change your settings in the credit card processor and say that this item is non-taxable.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Liz. I don't know why I'm just asking.
I'm sorry, Megan, if I'm just, you know.
You're like the expert. You're my backup expert right now. I'm trying to remember though if like baked goods are exempt from sales tax. I guess most food
They
is.
are. Baked goods are exempt as long as you're not adding stuff to it. Like if I added Oreos, I think I have to file like charge taxes on that.
Gotcha.
Do we have any other questions for Megan related to this topic, or even some topics that maybe you would like to see ALEI cover in the future? And maybe while you guys are thinking of that, Megan, I don't know if you have any questions specifically for our participants, as well as if you wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming conference and other program that you guys have.
Thanks for reminding me about that. The conference. Can't believe it's only like a week and a half away. So yeah, thank you. I really hope today was informative. Let me know if there is another topic that you're interested in hearing about. You want me to do some research in a presentation about. I think the conference we have going on is next Friday. It's October 28th. And we are doing it's our annual conference. We do it every year, and it's been 2 years since we've done it in person. So this year we get to do it in person in Annapolis. It's going to be at the Crown Plaza Hotel, but we're also still offering a remote attendance option for a reduced fee, because I feel like a lot of people are used to doing like Zoom things now, and like the convenience of being able to stay home. But we've got some really great topics lined up. Oh my goodness. So if you register, it's $50 to come in person, and you get like all the tea and the coffee that you can drink. It comes with lunch as well. Opportunity to network with fellow farmers, we get a lot of people who are service providers to attorneys. So you might get, connect with an attorney if you need one. I think the Maryland State Bar Association is going to have a table at the back, and we'll have our directories hand out. So if you want to talk to an attorney and get some referrals or get a list of people you can contact, will be there. So we get a handful of like, state senators or state representatives also attend every year, and law students, lots of great people. Our topics this year are going to touch on environmental justice concerns with the new EJ tool that MDE is required to use. Our keynote is going to cover some topics on the Farm Bill, that's kind of in the works right now. What are the hot topics and key focus areas for the Farm Bill discussion? I'm going to have a panel about the new food residuals, organics, recycling law. We'll have 2 folks from MDE, the ones that actually worked on putting together the regulations. And we'll have Ava Richardson from the Baltimore Office of Sustainability to also talk about, the city's perspective on state law. We'll have a panel featuring Senator Augustine about the new heirs property law that passed this year. That's a really great topic. I'm really excited to hear that one. For anybody who's interested in heirs property and reserving rights and how to make that process a lot smoother in the state. So I highly encourage everyone to check it out. I will try to find the link so you can go and register or look at the agenda in more detail. Some of the things that we have cooking at ALEI is we're currently working on a SARE grant proposal for a project that would involve doing a train the trainer for service providers and farmers, extension agents, to help farmers who are interested in accepting federal supplemental nutrition benefit payments. So if you wanted to accept farmers market nutrition program or WIC or SNAP benefits, you know, on your farm individually as you on your farm, if you're not, you know, if you find the application process confusing or overwhelming, or you would appreciate assistance to complete that process, I have a survey link that you could fill out and let us know your thoughts on that topic. We're going to give away for the farmers. You have a chance when you do the survey and you give us your your contact information, you are entered into a chance to win a $50 gift certificate to Amazon. So that's all I have. I will go ahead and drop those 2 links in the chat box, and I'm always happy to hear, feel free to shoot me an email. You can give me a call if that's easier for you. Just, I'll put my phone number in the chat box too. But I'm happy to hear from you if you've got questions or comments or anything like that. Email is probably the best way to reach me. And I will say that this month is not the best month to reach me. We've got a lot of stuff going on, especially with the conference next week. But so if I'm a little not responsive the next 2 weeks, I just got a lot going on, but anything after that, I will be happy to respond and set up a meeting.
Megan, thank you again so much for speaking with us tonight and just telling us a little bit more about this really important issue, but also, being willing to talk to our farmers in the future about other topics. And we're going to go ahead and close out the formal portion of the presentation tonight. And then after that, we can just save some time for discussion. So thank you again. And I think I forgot to introduce myself earlier, you all. I'm Kim Rush Lynch, and a planner and a program manager for our Urban Ag Conservation Program at the Prince George's Soil Conservation District. And we appreciate you guys being on tonight. Thanks again.